least not here in Argentina, they're kind of crappy.
Yeah, it's not great here either, but couldn't really go shopping anymore, and I really needed some food, so I ended up just ordering something today.
Right, hello, hello. We are, I think we're live. Well, we seem to have some feedback in the so, yeah. I swear one day I'll get good at these and know what the hell I'm doing. But today is not that day, so hello everyone. How is everyone?
I'm tired, but I'm good.
I'm good.
Nice, cool.
Yeah, me too, I think.
Great. This is really going great with the whole small talk thing.
That's alright.
Oh,
Well, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Good. It's I spent the morning replacing. Well, I say replacing, adding some hard drives to my NAS so I can actually back stuff up. Because today I don't back anything up.
That's
So-
not good. I at least have a bad backup solution, but at least it is one backup solution.
Well, it's a bunch of USB
I
hard
was
drives.
going to buy a
Well-
NAS a few months ago, and I ended up not buying the NAS because I found at the same price like a PCIe 4 M.2 SSD, like for 2 gigabytes of high-end PCIe 4 storage. So I just got that.
2 gigs or 2 terabytes.
Sorry, 2 terabytes.
Yeah, my backup solution is some hard drives I bought off Amazon, hooked up to my server that I manually copy files to whenever I want to do a backup.
God.
No offsite backup, no automation. It's just whenever I feel like it, I just run a cp-r command.
I mean, to be fair, I haven't
It's more
evolved
than
past
most
that yet.
people
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even have that. I have nothing. If the drive fails, I just live with it. I mean, nothing important on there anyway.
The hard drive that my server is booted off of has like something stupid like 40,000 power on hours, is marked as pre-fail in the smart status. It's having a moment, but it's fine. It hasn't failed yet.
Yet.
That's not good.
Okay, random
Like
question.
if
Have I
Mark is
missed
telling you-
something?
Have you?
In the Discord server, why is everyone's name changed to ... Or is that just
that's a streamer
that-
mode thing on Discord.
since when has that been?
Since they redid usernames.
Oh God. They
Yeah,
can't just
KTR won't be joining the channel. They said in Team Talk.
Oh, okay. That's fair. Yeah.
Oh,
Hello, Sky.
Hello.
Hello.
But yeah,
Yes.
I think you can disable the shortening of usernames, but yeah, by default, because now usernames are equatable with accounts.
yeah. You can just
No.
add people if you see them
Yeah,
too.
which is why by
That's
default it'll
not
lower
ideal.
to the first letter and then 3 dots, which is silly. If only we had some kind of number at the end, which wasn't shown by default and could be used to discriminate between people.
Yes, wouldn't that be some like crazy advanced technology that really sets Discord apart?
Yeah, it'd really be like a unique feature.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll hope that Tanner Tanner shows up. So, yeah. I mean, you've all had your opportunity to speak on the not silk aspect of things. How has anyone found time for silk so far? So, I suppose Bailey, let's start with you.
Not since I've been on my trip, but before then I've been working a lot on 2.18, getting that ready for release. I've updated all of our bindings. Finally, WebGPU is in a more consistent state across the implementations. So now, hopefully, you can rely less on vendor extensions. You no longer have to dispose objects through vendor extensions. Mozilla and Google have finally agreed to reference counting. So WebGPU is in a lot better of a state right now. So once 2.18 comes out, it'll be a bit of a pain to migrate your code over, but it does make things a lot more maintainable now that you don't have to have code paths for both WGPU and Dawn.
Yeah, I don't think we ever classified our WebGPU bindings as production ready. It's sort of in a similar state to iOS, where like, yeah, it's there, we maintain it, but it's probably not stable.
Yeah, it's a bit jank, but it can. It's. I'd say you can actually build build a build something in it without having to worry about everything changing nowadays. Now that they've settled on deleting GPU objects, which I think should have been like priority number 2 or 3 behind creation, but now that that's standardized, it's probably going to be a lot easier to build apps with it, which I'm excited for, because WebGPU is a nice API.
Yeah, it, to be honest, I was surprised that they agreed at all on the whole disposal mechanism.
I think Mozilla, or at least the people working on WGPU, had been thinking about it for a while about switching to it, but they just hadn't bothered with implementation yet. And once it was merged in the upstream WebGPU native WebGPU headers repo, that's when they finally bothered moving to reference counting. Because people from WGPU and Dawn had both agreed that that was probably the way to go.
Yeah, it's just, but yeah, it sort of goes to show how in flux everything is, given that these decisions are only happening now. So I guess
API is still changing too. Like they just recently added a way to iterate over adapters. So
rather
it's
than
still
just
all
requesting
changing.
one.
Yeah, you can iterate over it now and do what you do with Vulkan, where you can choose the optimal one for what you need. Like before, you would give it a power preference, and that's all you could change. Like you'd request a high power or low power device. But now you can be more granular about your decisions.
Okay, is that a native only thing, or is that
I think that's native only.
Okay, because I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of hoping that someone would make an implementation of WebGPU native that just calls into WASM for us. I mean, actually, no, take that back. I was kind of hoping that WGPU native eventually would work with the WASM backend for the WGPU crate, but there doesn't seem to be much progress there.
There's a PR open to do that, but it's stale.
Oh.
So once that get merged, we can actually explore WebGPU in the browser.
Yes, WebGPU.
Although real. It'd be a bit tricky for me to work on because Chrome still hasn't shipped WebGPU on Linux in the browser. So I don't think it works on ARM either. I don't think Chrome even publishes ARM64 binaries. So yeah, it'll be a bit tricky for me to work on, but I'll find some way to do it. It's something I definitely want to look into because OpenGL has not been kind.
I don't think Firefox supports WebGPU at all yet, right?
They have a 2-year-old implementation that you can kind of call into if you're using a nightly build, or no, not nightly, developer edition build. But it's no modern samples are run on it because fundamentals about surface creation has changed.
Right. So then can you explain what the use case for WebGPU right now is like, anyways? I get that.
Yeah.
Like on native device,
on the web, WebGPU is good for mostly compute, because the state of compute in WebGL is it existed for a short bit, then was killed for security reasons, and Bitcoin miners. WebGL compute is dead, and it's really hard to fake compute with fragment shaders. There are Bitcoin miners written with fragment shaders, which can run in WebGL, which are cursed. But raw compute grunt isn't available in the web right now, which is the main use case for WebGPU. If you need to run compute-heavy stuff and you like working with JavaScript, Chrome with WebGPU is a really good option, because I don't think Node or any other JavaScript runtimes that run outside of a browser have WebGPU support yet. So, yeah, Chrome is kind of the only place where you can get really good compute and graphics in JavaScript, to my knowledge. I think there are some good libraries for graphics, but nothing that really gives you good GPU compute.
Wasn't
Right, so
WebCL
the
a
way
thing
I
at some
see it,
point?
Yeah, there was WebCL too, but that also got killed.
Right.
but so I guess it's just for people that want to like experiment with GPUs, but using JavaScript.
Yeah, for
But
people
like,
who want to
there's
experiment
no
with GPUs but don't want to deal with the painful APIs of like
right.
they don't want to deal
But
with
like,
native
so
apps.
is there any point? So it's only like recent Chrome build, and it seems like it's not super stable. So I guess like using it in the website probably is pointless, right?
Yes, developing a commercial like developing something that needs to run on every machine is not viable in the web right now. On native, it's decently viable because the backends are actually quite mature for both WGPU and Dawn. So you can generally presume web GPU code that runs on one machine will run on all of them if you don't use any
Right.
vendor extensions
That
that
makes
it is.
sense.
But
So
currently on the web, it's not stable enough.
I kind of feel like then for us at least, the like supporting WASM web GPU is kind of pointless, right? Because like there's no point in using it for someone that wants to like just experiment with web GPU to like get, because they can just use the native version. There's no point to like compiling your C# code to like wasm/js and then running that through like a new Chrome version and then going back, right? But like there's
Yeah,
also no point in using it in like a website.
I think the main thing is getting it while it's early because
Yeah, that makes sense.
eventually this stuff will mature, and if we have support code, also it'll just help mature those stale branches I have for WASM. If we can get that into at least a partially mergeable state, I think that alone will be nice because it means that people can start improving the WASM support in Silk. Because currently, SDL can sometimes kind of run. GLFW still I haven't worked on. Um, we do hook into the on-frame callback thing properly at least, but the current state of WASM is it's really buggy, and getting WebGPU working would be a large motivation to actually improve it because I would like to port some of my stuff to the web. That would be fun.
I see. Yeah, I mean, it'd be cool for sure. I'm just like, I looked into the like .NET 8 WASM stuff like a few days ago, and I don't know. I feel like it's not really there to like do anything beyond like a small experimentation, essentially. Like,
Yeah, I've been trying the .NET 8 WASM toolchain a lot recently. Just every couple months, I'll recompile the WASM samples we currently have in that WASM Take 3 branch, and I'll run them against the latest .NET 8 runtime and SDK, and it still has the exact same bug that it had like a year ago. So we're currently still blocked on something input breaks SDL initialization something runtime error, and that's all I have.
yeah, I think
We've
that's
reported
rough.
everything, right?
Yes, I've reported bugs upstream, and nothing's happened.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to
I
make
think
sure
that's
that is the case.
essentially. I think that's essentially where we were like 2 years ago with .NET 6 also. I think it's pretty much the exact error last time I checked. So yeah, I don't think it wasn't native basically. So like calling into browser like native symbols or whatever you want to call it on like .NET wasm is like possible really. So
There is something that the WebGPU native people have been experimenting with, and that is a WebGPU runtime for WASI, which actually does sound like something I'd want to support. I'm not sure how windowing would work through WASI, but there's an open issue in the WebGPU headers repository for WASI support for WebGPU, which I think would be actually really cool to support because it would mean single binary you publish and runtime whatever on local machines, which is very similar to what .NET can do, but just doesn't. Like with single file publishes to all platforms, you can't really do that with .NET easily. But I think it'd be interesting if you could do that, and I think WebGPU WASI support would be interesting to have in Silk. But yeah.
to expand on Aussie for a second, because I'm really big in wasn't right now. I think WASI is just a small set. I don't think there's any native support there yet. It's mostly about like block storage, I think. But then there is a newer extension, I guess. I don't think there's.
AussieX.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not a big fan, but it could work rather using like standard POSIX. But I don't think there's any .NET support, and it's also just really janky in the first place. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I've seen WASIX a lot because the creators of it have been pushing a lot for Zig support, so I've been seeing them in the Zig Discord a lot.
Yeah,
It's quite jank. But yeah, all WASI needs to be able to do full silk stuff is the ability to DL open, DL sim, DL close. But the WebGPU people have, not the WebGPU, the WASI people have been hesitant on that for reasons of sandboxing, security, etc. And none of the implementations of WASM WASI have been interested in it either, because they just say go to WASI, and WASI says go to the implementation, so it's a back and forth catch-22.
I mean, the whole point in my mind of WASM and WASI is to just have that isolation, have that sandboxing. And sort of the whole point of WASX is to undo that. So yeah, I don't really get it, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I see. It's jank, and either way, the .NET WASM support is also jank. So, in its current state, we can't really support web WASI stuff. I think someone was trying a couple days ago to get WebGL running through Scriptin something. I don't know if they got anywhere with that. I said, let me know if you get anywhere with it, and they haven't responded. So I'm not sure if they have actually done anything or gotten anywhere. But I think they were using their own function pointer and just giving that to Silk.NET OpenGL, which may actually get around some of the bugs, but I think in general...
That should, in theory, be what the pinvoke override does. Pinvoke override.
The pinvoke override we have is just to trick the runtime into generating the pinvoke signatures. We never actually call into the DLL override for GL. It only exists to trick the runtime because it's buggy.
There's definitely like the pinvoke override is really weird. I probably wouldn't recommend using it on something as large as OpenGL because there's just so many endpoints. You'll have a huge amount of code, and like the AOT compiler will probably cry all night when you generate that much code. But it is definitely a way to get things to work on WASM because there's no libc obviously in WASM. There's no alternative in WASM, so you have to import the symbols directly, and pinvoke will essentially declare those symbols, and then you can resolve them. But there's no...
Yeah. In the case of my branch of WASM, what I do is... What I did originally was no changes to anything. I just called into SDL to get the function pointers for GL, and then the runtime was crashing because of missing function definitions, or... basically, it didn't have... So when WASM does pinvoke, it calls into a table with different function definition types. So like 4 floats for the parameters for GL clear and no return to me. And it wasn't generating those tables for OpenGL. So stuff like GL clear, which is a really weird function parameters of 4 floats, would cause the runtime to crash. So solution was to create a pinvoke override and then never call into it. So the runtime would generate that table, and then just use SDL's function loading, which Unscripted provides, to then load the function pointers into a GL context.
Yeah, that's probably possible. The other, I think, also pretty possible solution would be if we would just ship essentially a GL specific libc replacement of sorts, because that works really well. You can just make a custom WASM module and then load that, and then essentially reference that for all your function loadings, and that will work decently well. because you have that table manually generated, and it'll like then you can pretty much reference everything. But it's just really slow from my experience, and there's so many other runtime bugs that
Yeah, and Scripton, I think for performance is the way to go because that's what everyone else is doing. So it's going to be what's focused on by the .NET team. So unfortunately, for performance and maintainability, Inscripton is probably the way to go. But we're so heavily limited by runtime bugs that
yeah. So I think what I would suggest is exactly that, to essentially make a module that just wraps Inscripton. But it's still so slow, and then also the runtime will just die very frequently for lots of reasons. It's also just not exactly useful to report issues like that to the runtime team because they can't really easily reproduce them, and then they will never get fixed anyways.
Yep. I struggle to even like reduce down some of the bugs I hit. Like with our input test in the lab, that causes something about SDL initialization to just fail. You can't call any SDL functions in that project for some reason. I haven't been able to reduce it down to some subset, but if I run the blank window example, then that runs fine. And I'm able to call SDL functions, but the moment you call into the input code, some part of it just triggers the runtime to just break all SDL calls. And I have yet to figure out why. I contacted the Uno people, they didn't know. So it's very hard to reduce down to a reportable bug.
The problem is that a lot of the bugs are triggered by the linker deciding to link specific things in. And then you don't even have to call the function, it just has to think it should link that in. And then for some reason that will cause a bug. And it's essentially impossible to properly track because tracking when the linker will use things and when it won't is essentially impossible. So yeah, I have no way of reporting that either.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, I suppose one other thing is, where does native AOT LVM fit into all of this? Because I know that that's currently that's a community project. It's not an official implementation of WASM support by the .NET team, but it is something that's being worked on in the runtime lab, and I have a feeling it will end up being production ready at some point.
I haven't tested it. Some people in the C# server recommended me to try it over the current WASM support. And I've tried building it and had no luck because I can't even build .NET locally on my machine. The instructions don't work for me, and I don't know why, and I haven't been bothered to figure out why. So I haven't bothered trying the native AOT LLVM stuff. But I think eventually, once I get the runtime building, I'll give it a shot. I just haven't found a way to do that yet.
Yeah, because I'd imagine the intention will be to put the native AOT LVM implementation through the same shoddy process that the current implementation does, i.e. that custom JavaScript code gen module that it goes through that originally said that a pointer was not an unmanaged type. I have a feeling they're going to keep that around for compatibility reasons if and when it becomes production ready. But you know,
that module caused even more nightmares because it regressed a lot.
Did it?
In my first try to revive WASM from Kai's old branch, enums were no longer blittable. Not just pointers. Enums were also not blittable anymore. That I spoke to the Uno people and they told me to try. They pushed out a fix to theirs, which I think patched over it.
Originally, when I did the WASM work, that was a bug. I reported that, and then they fixed it, essentially. So it should be fixed, otherwise maybe consider reopening that original issue.
It regressed, then I think was fixed again, because I haven't had it since. Because I initially reported it to the people because they're faster to respond to my WASM woes, and they were basically like, okay, we're We're gonna push out a more cutting edge build to the beta nougat, and that seemed to work. So I think it regressed at some point and then was fixed again. Because I think it was like some pre-net 7 build worked, and then net 7 didn't, and then after net 7 some beta build started working again. I think that's when enums stopped being blittable. That's when that happened.
Kai, that thing you were talking about for custom WASM modules, I mean, I posted a small C snippet because I was trying to understand what you were saying. Is that basically what you're on about?
Let me quickly pull up the channel, 1 second.
I put it in both because I don't know which one you look at.
Yeah, I just looked in meetings. So
There's 2
yes.
meetings.
So the normal meetings channel, not the voice channel. So yes, that's sort of what it would look like. Just that you generate the WASM yourself, and then probably instead of doing the whole re-export everything, you just export a get prog address from there, and then you just have it's essentially a p-invoke override, but written in like WASM, and then it will work because .NET has no part in it, and that'll like load fine. It'll like work easily, and then you just import that and use it as get prog address, and then things word of run, I think.
Yeah, I think that would fix some of the runtime bugs, but that sounds like such a nightmare to write.
Yeah, you essentially have to generate it, and then it kind of works. But it's not really worth the effort because the runtime will die for no reason, anyways. Especially when actually trying to do high performance things, it'll just die for no reason all the time, and there's nothing you can do really.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not there yet. I hope someday we'll get a good. I hope native AOT LLVM improves the situation a lot. I really hope it does because I want to run more stuff on the web, even if it's just through WebGL. That sounds like fun.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that WASM will be super important in the future anyway, so I think they'll pretty much have to fix this all eventually.
Yeah. Our use case is just so arcane and so weird that it just breaks so much.
You just need to somehow convince the Azure people that WASM is somehow important for Microsoft Azure, and then they'll quite quickly fast track it. That's certainly what happened with native AOT.
Yep. Just convince them it's important, and it will immediately get fixed. Every problem.
All of the problems, yes. But I mean, to be
perfect
fair,
runtime in a month.
I mean,
Sorry? Hello?
I think your mic cut out, Perksy.
Oh no. That's not good. Someone have the stream open? Oh yeah, he's still there. But
Oh yeah, the stream's open, but their mic isn't on.
interesting.
I have the stream. Oh, I heard you say, does someone have the stream open in the stream? I was like, oh yeah, I do. I'm so tired. Okay, yeah, Perksy's mic has just failed. That's not good.
Is it just the mic, or has the stream also failed now?
Stream is working, but the mic is dead.
Okay. Yeah, so,
Let's find something else to talk about while Perksy I heard them for a second. There we go. There they are. Welcome back, Perksy.
I have had to disable noise cancelling, so I hope that doesn't annoy anyone.
I am in a room with a loud air conditioner, so I'm just on push to talk. It's
fine.
fine.
Yes. What the hell was I saying?
You were gonna say something Azure runtime.
Oh right, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was gonna say WebAssembly is pretty much the closest thing that we've come to so far. to a universal, like, binary assembly interchange format. Because I mean,
Yeah.
especially with things like WASM time, you could take a WASM module and just plonk it anywhere. I mean, heck, I don't remember how low you got on the Windows version numbers, but it is pretty impressive. How portable.
I ran a bit of Silk.net, a bit of Silk.net math code on Windows 98 by transpiling WASM to C89, and then compiling that for Windows 98, and it worked.
It's pretty impressive, but I feel like right now it's pretty much at the stage that IL has been for like 20 years, where it's like we have a good enough runtime that it like runs well on like most computers, but then the only problem is standardizing APIs, and well, that's going really great with Wasm Time just doing their own thing now. And so yeah, I'm not so confident. It's pretty cool in general, but yeah, I don't know if it'll stick around because they just can't figure out how to standardize things.
Yep. It sucks, but there's not really much we can do unless we want to build our own WASM runtime.
Yes,
I am
let's
doing
do
that,
that.
but I
Obviously, that's the obvious answer.
Exactly. We build our own WASM runtime. We have our own
won't-
custom
Well,
proprietary DL open functions.
No, you just need Silk get address. We'll need that, and that's just the way to go.
Oh yeah.
That did implement a custom libdl that literally manually read the ELF file and then created some memory and marked that memory as executable and jumped in. It is nuts.
Ah, yeah, that's really cursed.
Well, it's amazing the things that people do for fun.
Yeah.
Like Silk.net 3.0 segue.
Yep.
So actually, we're still on Bailey. Kai, what have you been doing with Silk.net?
Not much, to be honest. It'll be pretty quick. Yeah, I've been sticking my head into Wasm once again for like a day. Didn't really get anywhere, and yeah, didn't really have any time and or motivation to work on the generator right now. Yeah, I'll start. I've essentially quit my job now, and I'll start uni in like 6 months, 4 months. I don't know, something like that. So hopefully I'll have more time then. But I'm not. Yeah, we'll see how much I have to study and shit. But yeah, I think maybe I'll have more time soonish.
Soon, Tim. Yeah. Cool. And I suppose Thomas, you're the last maintainer we haven't covered off.
Yeah, it's not like I've been doing much either. Like I've just been very busy with school and things, so yeah. TribuGL hasn't been getting much love either, unfortunately.
Oh.
It's just been very busy year.
Yeah, because I think that's currently the biggest threat to Silk at the moment. Because obviously we keep talking about 3.0 because 3.0 solves so many maintenance problems and just solves so many of the current user problems. But none of us have any time to work on it, and it's very unfair to go to a community contributor and say, "Hey, implement a whole generator system and make a library for us, please." So. Because I know that a lot of Kai's work has been very, very instrumental in that. Yeah, I'm pretty confident that once we've got Kai's version of Silk Search working, like the whole simple abstraction thing, and it's like a fully abstract pipeline. We could tweak that to our heart's content for years to come, and in theory, never need a 3.0, 4.0, sorry. But none of us have time to work on something with that large of a scope.
Yeah. A lot of my time has been spent doing on other languages, learning different APIs and working on games and stuff. So I'm mostly relegated to just general maintenance again on 2.x instead of like active new features. Aside from the new Spear V bindings, I haven't really added too many new features to that's going to be added in the next 2.x release. Which I guess I should mention the other new stuff that I've added since 2017. We have Spear V Cross, Spear V Reflect, and Shader C bindings, all with native libraries on every platform for every architecture. So hopefully that makes working with Vulkan a lot easier, since you won't have to. Yeah.
Thank you for that. By the way, I immediately got distracted by other projects instead of using it, but it looks real good. So
Yeah, currently you can't really use them because our experimental builds are broken, and we haven't pushed out to 18 yet for that reason. So once we get our experimental...
Bailey, listen here. There's a pull request that will fix all that if you just approve it.
Oh yeah, I was going to review that, and then I got busy doing many other things, as I am... See, I was laying in bed, and I saw that PR, and I think the people who are also in the room can contest.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be Bailey that approves that. Anyone on this call other than Sky and
Yes,
Katiara
please someone else do it. I have other people who I am hanging out with.
I've only seen the do not merge this under any circumstances. So I'm not sure what I'm supposed to review.
There is a PR to fix the experimental builds, and then from there we can.
yeah,
We might have to do another.
Is 1578. The experimental feed is 1577.
Yeah, I think before we merge, we might have to do another round of updating dependencies. But
you can pretty much just ping me on Discord anytime, and I'll review whatever you want. I don't really care. There's pretty much never it takes me more than like 30 minutes to review. So yeah, just ping me. I'll review it.
yeah, it shouldn't be. Last I saw, at least when I got the email, the PR wasn't that large, so it should be easy to review. I just haven't gotten around to it.
5 changed files for a total of how many lines? 125 added, 8 removed lines.
I have reviewed the whole build tools regenerate PRs before, so that shouldn't be a problem.
Plus 1 million lines.
Yeah. Very fun. Lots of review time.
Here's the PR in question. Yeah, I got distracted by other stuff, so I haven't worked anything even remotely Silk related lately. Although I may have some stuff that'll help people wanting to use an async like main game loop, or to use a sync and await for the main game loop rather, at some point soon. But that's really early stages still.
Makes sense. But yeah, we'll try to get experimental releases rolling again, and then from there we'll make sure there hasn't been too many changes in any of our APIs. We'll update anything that needs to be updated, then hopefully we'll have 2.18 out at some point within the next month. I've said that every month for the past couple months, but I'm hoping it'll be true.
To be fair,
I want first.
Sorry, I'm interested in knowing how the sync await thing will work for windowing stuff in game loop.
Okay, so
Like, what's the idea?
the idea, like at its core, is that it's the same way you can use async await in WPF or Windows Forms. It's a custom. It's a class that wraps around like a loop that just where it's a queue that gets continuations and stuff added to it, and then executes through the loop until it gets a signal that whatever your main thing has exited, and it's a single-threaded synchronization context that just adds.
It's not about like turning the. I understood like turning the events into something async, but no, the idea is just so you can use async await for like UI and stuff.
Yeah, and one thing it would allow you to, like, you could make a custom awaitable thing that waits for the next frame of graphics, for instance, or for the next update call, or you could use the regular stuff with that you'd use in a normal UI app to have something go off on the thread pool that's like IO or whatever, and you can await it on your main loop and be brought back into the main loop once it completes.
Oh,
without
so I've done
blocking.
something similar, or at least like very raw. And I basically just made a synchronization context that stores a queue of what needs to be executed, and at the end or start of each update, I would just go for the queue and flash everything basically. And that was enough to have some asynchronous, like async await, so I can do on the UI stuff, and I will do things like, let's say I want some UI element to what's the word I'm looking for? Like go back and forth, like red, like to show the warning or something. I would just like set the color to red, await half a second, set the color to original, await half a second, and repeat 3 times, and it will just look like it's popping red
Yeah,
and things like that.
that's
But if
exactly
you
what
want to
this
make
is
it
as well.
so you also support more multi-threaded things.
My goal with this is effectively to do exactly that, and to make it like one polished, so that we could maybe put it in Silk Community and have it just be something that you can then run instantly on top of Silk.net windowing and through
Yeah,
the like through a call to run or whatever, and just have it integrate with that nicely.
I like
That's my
it.
main goal.
I like that a lot.
It's just going to take some time to make sure my logic actually is correct.
Yeah.
All right. So what have you been working on, Perksy, with Silk?
I've just realised that my OBS mic has been muted this whole time. Sorry, guys.
We can hear you.
um, so yeah, it's to sort of reiterate. Sorry, you've. I shall repeat myself. So as part of the work that I've been doing, now that I have more time on my hands because I no longer have work obligations like Kai, I'm trying to, in addition to the day-to-day maintenance that I was doing on 2.x, I'm now trying to figure out how we can design 3.0 in a way where we where we can still implement it without without running into the problem that no one has time to implement it on the maintenance team. And part of that is trying to figure out how much code we can delegate to the how much work we can delegate to code that we know works already. And part of that is evaluating, right, okay, what have we got in Catchup already? What have we got? What do we actually need? Because as much as the symbol layer is amazing in that it makes generating so much easier and so much more efficient, at the same time, if we can make sacrifices by using like Roslyn or whatever, and sort of making it less the completely general purpose solution we wanted it to be, then we can accelerate the time of 3 months, because ultimately we need to get Silk.net in a place that's not only stable for our users, because I mean, to be honest, 2.x is starting to get there, especially with all of the with all of the Windows SDK improvements that we've had recently, with the com pointer, and also all of the stuff that you've been doing, Bailey, with Spurvy, and just the abundance of bindings that you've been adding. I feel like 2.x is starting to get to a place where it's stable for users. But Bailey, in your opinion, is 2.x stable for maintainers?
For maintainers, definitely not, because every couple months we'll have some binding or some native library which will change or break Silk Touch or break our CI builds, or just it'll get bigger and then suddenly the GitHub runners can't compile it anymore, so then I have to stare at the CI files for an hour figuring out what I don't need to clone and what I don't need what I don't need just to get it to build again. It's been like 3 times now where the GitHub runners have run out of disk space when compiling something. Like we've had to disable our Swift shader and angle builds, I believe, because the projects have grown to such a size that we cannot compile them in CI anymore.
Wait, has Silk Touch actually broken so far?
Not Silk Touch, I mean build tools. Build tools has had many breakages as bindings change. Like currently
Yeah.
we're stuck on Clang Sharp 15 right now, as something about how either Clang or Clang Sharp handles types is completely changed, and it's fully borked generation in a really weird way that I haven't been able to figure out. We're not type mapping properly and such. I think Perksy put more time into it than I did, and basically said that it's a lot of time to fix that we don't have, and it would probably be breaking even after we did fix all the bugs, all the like breaking changes to existing code, which we're trying to avoid with 2.x. So in 3.x, we should be able to change easily to Clang Sharp 16, but at the moment, unless we could figure out some way of reversing the type changes in Clang/Clang Sharp, we're stuck on Clang Sharp 15.
So I thought about this when I read the text Perksy wrote about Silk X or whatever you want to call it. I don't really know. I think it might be quite reasonable to just for now build something that works around essentially the TerraFX definitions, and then I think for making it silkier, we can still reuse a lot of what Silk Touch does, because I think while it has horrendous compilation times, it's pretty stable so far. I don't think it broke once since essentially 2.4 or something, which is like over a year at this point. So it might be possible to only replace that like lower layer we have, and some of the build tools mix-ins, I think we call them, and then it should be fairly easy to like generate most of the code without too much work. It's not great because compilation is still not good, and Silk Touch isn't really that easy to modify, but we didn't really have to modify it so far, so it might be worth a shot.
Yeah, and that's exactly the approach that I'm trying to take with Silk Touch X as it's currently called, but you know, eventually it may become Silk Touch 3.0. You never know. Yeah, so essentially what this is doing is it's running Clang Sharp just as the current Silk Touch 3.0 does, instead of having to redefine the configuration, it essentially takes the existing TerraFX response files that would otherwise be passed directly to Clang Sharp, and it gives the opportunity for us to modify those, do programmatical modifications to those response files, then invoke Clang Sharp, and then it gives Silk Touch another opportunity to modify the syntax trees that have been generated by Clang Sharp using the Roslyn APIs, and then finally as output. So currently at the moment there's only one Silk Touch modification implemented, and it's the changing namespace mod. But essentially the idea is that in the generator configuration we can just add a list of mods, like, oh, I want to change namespace, here's the change namespace parameter, or like eventually there will be a mod that is like use Silk Touch, and then it will convert the DLL imports generated by Clang Sharp to be native APIs, and instead of externs it'll be partials, and then run the Silk Touch generator and then bring the generated code together. because exactly as you said, Kai, Silk Touch, while it's not in its best shape, it works, and it is just about maintainable. I mean, yeah, it's got a lot of things that aren't necessarily. There's some mental headcanon that's been lost with time, I think. But all in all, we've been able to make changes before. We can make changes again to it. And really, we need to focus on getting a stable 3.0 out there so that we can ease the maintenance burden on us and finally deliver on the promises that we've made to our users.
Yeah, I haven't really looked into exactly what you've done so far. I just want to point out to you again that this like mod system and all that, I completely agree with it, and I think it's like that's all the way to go. But Silk Touch, as it exists, already has exactly this. So we really only need to write like a small amount of glue code between essentially TerraFX style output and Silk Touch. So yes, renaming like namespaces and all that we still have to do, but at the function level, Silk Touch does all of this right now. So like, I'm not super sure how much overlapping work there is, so it might be worth looking at. I can send you the folder later, at like the modifications, or I don't know what they're called, that we already have. Because yeah, I think there's a lot of code there that we would just write again essentially.
Sure, but I mean, you've got the whole simple system. You're reading the XML instead of the C# code. I'm trying to eliminate as many possible variables that we can, because the XML system that I originally wrote for ClankSharp, it is absolutely the way to go if we want the full flexibility and want to generate a large model of data. But at the same time, realistically, we're just trying to take the TerraFX bindings and make them silkier. For that purpose, we've just gone with Roslyn syntax trees instead.
Yeah, what I mean with what I meant in this case is the old Silk Touch code essentially here. I'll send the link 1 second. So if you look at, I'll just put in a voice chat, right? I hope you can see that. So if you look at that folder.
Oh right. You mean old Silk Touch? Yes.
Yeah,
yes, I agree.
old Silk Touch. That basically has all of the like relevant code. There's a small amount of build tool overload generation stuff that we would still have to replace. But, like most of the silky things right now are just in there, and then everything around it is just ceremony.
Yes, so my intention is to essentially copy and paste all of the files within current Silk Touch and hammer them into new Silk Touch, Silk Touch X, make it so it's a full pipeline down from taking the TerraFX inputs, getting the output, modifying them, and then passing them into old Silk Touch, if you like, so that we generate the final bindings. There is still some stuff that we need to do before we invoke that. So that, like, we got to rename all to Pascal case and everything. Eventually, we've got to figure out how to do overloads without actually doing overloads, because that went well in 2.x. With the
3 to the 11 overloads.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I always feel sorry for someone when they try to use the new compoint stuff. I have to sort of advise them to just follow your heart. Eventually, the compiler will be happy, but yeah. So, but that's basically because of the whole simple transformation layer stuff. It would be a lot better than using Roslyn, but it's also a lot more code than using Roslyn. So I'm just trying to go with the lean and mean approach, and hopefully we can accelerate 3.0, because I do want to start getting to a point where we can have regular pre-alphas up on an experimental feed, so we can consistently integrate and get those bleeding edge users to give us regular feedback.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Cool. So I suppose if we're all agreement, then I will carry on with that and see where it get. To be honest, if I get a prototype working where the bindings look roughly silky, I mean they won't have overloads, but it'll look like our style of bindings, then perhaps we should have a discussion in either these catch-ups or perhaps even a working group meeting to discuss whether we want to make that the primary 3.0 effort. Again, bearing in mind people's time. But yeah, there's a reason why I wanted to keep it separate, is that we don't know whether this lean and mean approach will be the primary approach going forward. And I want to make sure that until we have evidence that this will work, that we're not jumping in and replacing all the 3.0 work that's already happened.
Yeah, I agree. We should talk about it then. The main thing that I'm concerned about, I think, is that to me the like biggest goal of like 3.0 is replacing all of the like the weird resolving infrastructure we have in core, and I don't see how this will work then.
So I think my plan is to integrate more closely with native library. To be honest, I think recent conversations that I've observed in the low-level channel, the unsafe channel in the C# Discord, is that the whole loading thing is still a very common issue for everyone. So I think it's going to be less us having the whole native context thing and more us making a framework around the native library DLL import resolve callback. So a lot of code can probably be reused because we know we spent ages getting our resolution working, but I think the code will still be there. It's just not integrated in the same way because we know that the current way it's integrated is clunky.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, I think the plan for 3.0 was, and at least in my mind, sort of is that we just get rid of all of this resolving infrastructure, because it's really, like, at least to me, it doesn't seem like this is the way the runtime really likes to import native symbols. And it seems like there's a lot of newer tooling like native AOT, and also older tooling like Mono that just breaks when you do this.
Yeah.
And then we also have a bunch of like operating system incompatibilities there, where there's no libc, or like there's so many issues there that ideally we can just get rid of those and just do p-invoke everywhere, right?
Yeah, one place where the current way just does not work at all is FreeBSD, which a bunch of people have been trying to like properly champion as in a supported platform for .NET. For .NET, I think they're going for .NET 8 or .NET 9. Our current resolution code is completely broken on FreeBSD because of how their libc works. You can't DL open is the main problem. So we have to fall back to.
I thought we worked around that already.
Paths. Yeah, we got around that by just using DLL import. So using p-invoke directly always would solve that problem.
Yeah,
So,
I think ideally we don't even need. Ideally, we don't even need that, because ideally we just ask the runtime to import the symbols we want, and then we don't deal with any libc, libtl, whatever it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
that would make it a lot more portable.
That is exactly my intention, is that where possible, I do not want to be using the current 2.0 Silk Touch. Like that's only a fallback for things like OpenGL and Vulkan, where we do have a custom proc address loader that isn't the platform default. For static ones, like, yeah, we should be using DLL import, there's no reason why. And if we really wanted to do the marshalling ourselves rather than using things like library import, then yes, we can revive some of the middlewares from 2.8 Silk Touch. But yeah, I only want to resort to our current style of bindings, our current style of loading, where possible. And where we can't do that, my intention is to try and integrate all of the stability that we currently have with regards to us always being able to resolve which shared object we're currently trying to open, and doing it in a way that the runtime actually likes. So obviously the native library class has a DLL import callback now, but if it can't find the shared object you're talking about, you can give it a path. You can load it yourself. And obviously runtimes that don't support that won't do that. But that's kind of the point, because if we're going against the grain, it just won't invoke our horrible resolution code. And to be honest, if that's the case, like for example, you brought up the native AOT example. Realistically, you'll be linking against that shared object as part of your build time script or whatever. You'll be explicitly telling the linker rather than trying to use libdl to invoke or use DLL import, for example. Or rather, DLL import would do that resolution for you rather than us having to do it. So yes, all of our actual function pointer loading for like the simple cases like GLFW, like basically anything that isn't OpenGL or Vulkan or OpenXR or anything that doesn't have a custom get proc address, I intend to use DLL import or library import.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should still allow essentially. So I think we should still p invoke on Vulkan directly. So like use the get proc address thing, and like link to that directly. But yeah, I agree. It should be, it should be as static as possible, I guess.
Yeah, I mean we can discuss that more offline. I guess my main worry is that it's with sending users always through trampolines when they might not need to. But
yeah, I mean
when it
the
comes
last.
to Vulkan, we can't DLL import everything. I think Vulkan loader, when you DLL import like Vulkan functions directly from Vulkan loader, I think only the base methods are exposed.
yeah, so it's the base methods and the WSI. Everything else isn't exposed.
Yeah, you should really only open VK get instance proc address, I think.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, yes,
Yeah.
that's the only official.
Yes.
Yeah, and then I think everything else we can dynamically load, but the point is more that should be like guaranteed to be statically linked or to be invoked, whatever. Yeah, but like the thing is, you'll get very ugly code around that again, and it's not so it's not that clear what like handling we can do there really, because you also have you have newer drivers now that like take the spec very seriously here, and then you get things where you get different addresses based on like the instance, and so yeah, I think the handling code there is just very ugly in general, and I'm not sure how we can solve that with like the existing design.
I think we
Yeah,
can,
for
we
Vulkan,
can
it's
figure it out.
tough. Like the fact that you can get different pointers for different instances mean like the different function pointers for different instances means that we may actually have to wrap all Vulkan functions into an instance object, which I guess kind of
Well,
ties into something
I
I've
think we
been
discussed.
toying with.
I think we discussed exactly this last time. That like
Yeah.
for Vulkan and probably also for OpenGL, I don't know the OpenGL spec that well. Really having that object API is kind of critical to even providing a technically correct binding. There's not really a way to provide a technically correct Vulkan binding without having that object API, because you have nothing to associate the functions to. And it's not just instance. Devices have the exact same thing where drivers are free to do whatever they want with the device get proc address, and they may just exploit different functions for different devices. And it's not that unreasonable to have multiple devices in one application. It's pretty unreasonable to have multiple instances, but multiple devices is pretty normal, I think. So there, it's not technically correct now, and it's very difficult to solve this, I think.
Yeah, in the case of OpenGL, we don't have to worry about this as much, as all you need is the global GL context object, and everything else all in place. Yeah, in the case of Vulkan, we will need, for a fully correct set of bindings of Vulkan, we will need some way of differentiating the functions for instances and device, which, yeah, will basically be what we've been experimenting with for object wrappers. I think that'll basically be what we have to do to provide a fully correct set of bindings for Vulkan. We'll have to have that sort of wrapper on both instances and devices at the very least.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it is worth noting what we have already is technically correct if you only use it for one. If you only use one instance for one VK instance, VK device pair, but it's not the best design.
Yeah, you have that internal, I think, concurrent dictionary, which makes it technically correct, but it's very bad, I think. And I don't think that's really a design we want to continue using in whatever shape 3.0 turns out to be. I think that's something we definitely need to eliminate, because that like lambda native context is just like that's terrible, both for performance and also just for maintainability, I think.
Yes, yeah. I think we'll explore that when we get to actually making Vulcan bindings. Because there's lots to be discussed there. I suppose what I've currently got in terms of Silk Touch X progress is I have managed to get the skeleton of the pipeline working in that we now have Windows SDK bindings that are exactly like the TerraFX bindings, but with a changed namespace. Ooh. It even has the exact same copyright header as the TerraFX bindings, but it's a work in progress, okay? But obviously we were discussing this yesterday, and we realised that, hey, we can change things. We need to decide what package structure we have. So obviously we were discussing what on earth we can call our Windows bindings. Obviously for TerraFX, this is terrafx.interrupt.windows. But the problem is we have a windowing. That would be very confusing if we have a Windows and a windowing. So
Yeah.
I guess let's resume that discussion.
Yeah, so there are a couple paths we have to take and consider. So we can't just change, like we can't put it under like a different namespace. Like we can't just do silk.net.wind or .platform.windows because the class name will still be Windows. So I think we do want to have, since we're in 3.0, we're going to try to do Objective-C bindings. It's the plan at least.
When
I think
supports it.
Yeah, I think at the very least, I think we should have some form of scoping of the namespace. Like there should be silk.net.platform.win32.posix. Darwin or .macOS.
Oh, so we're talking about windowing. So you mean like a platform abstraction layer then?
Not really platform abstraction layer. I mean like bindings to the specific platform's APIs. So like there will be Windows, POSIX, Linux, Darwin, and whatever else we would want to bind to. So like, and then we could scope graphics and then windowing and such. Since we have the opportunity in 3.0 to change namespaces and class names. And since it is relevant to the point of topic of what do we name Win SDK, I think we should explore more changing how we manage namespaces, because I think it could lead to easier searchability.
Yes, definitely. Because searchability is exactly the reason why I'm worried about making windowing and Windows. You do. So when you were talking about the platform thing yesterday, I didn't exactly grasp what you were saying, but now that you've re-explained it, it doesn't sound like the worst thing in the world, because I suppose if you have one for like every, I guess, header set, but like you have a platform or an SDK for Windows, or you have one for like the Linux headers or whatever, it does make sense. I guess it's just bike shedding on the name a bit, because calling it platform might have the platform connotation, the platform abstraction layer connotations, because especially when you consider the naming conventions that some of our related libraries, some similar libraries are using, like OpenZK, when they say platform, they refer to the platform abstraction layer, and given how many of the Silk.net users are former OpenZK users, I'm worried about that. Us calling a set of bindings for a particular platform in a platform namespace might cause confusion. But yes, I agree in theory. Hello? Has everyone died?
Sorry, I'm forgetting. I'm gonna have to push talk on. We could do silk.os.win32 instead of .platform. I think that might give a more clear.
Then what do you do for the other ones? You can't really put. I mean, you can't really have os.macOS or something. That makes no sense.
Oh, no, yeah, it would be for the OS APIs, like you would have Win32, POSIX, Linux, Darwin, FreeBSD, etc. So POSIX defines more functions over libc. Like we could do this in a way. So like instead of silk.platform.win32, it would be silk.os.win32.
But
And
I think that doesn't really make that much sense outside of Win32. I think none of the other platforms really have like platform-specific APIs, right? Like,
Linux does, like the syscalls and the Linux libc header extensions. And then there's like there's the POSIX standard of things, and then Darwin also has its own extended libc. I think it does make sense on those platforms in terms of libc, because they don't all have, because you have the base POSIX libc, you have the base C standard libc, and then you have the extensions on top of those.
I think we're talking about different things, because when the Win32 package, as it currently stands, includes basically the entirety of the Windows SDK, and likewise, obviously, macOS has a macOS SDK, which I'd imagine will be a similar process. It will have the basics, everything from basic kernel stuff to all of like the Metal kit, the AR kit, and everything, and all of the other various libraries that the macOS SDK provides, and it's the same with the iOS SDK. Linux is the outlier there because it doesn't have a standard set. Now I know that before I misspeak, I'm going to double check, but I think TerraFX has some POSIX stuff. Or at least, well, there's certainly an Xlib, but yeah, there's other stuff.
I see.
Yeah.
In that case, then yeah, it only really makes sense to have OS SDKs for Win32 and Darwin. Maybe it would be better to have a silk.net.libc .POSIX, Linux, Darwin, etc. So then,
Well, aren't those? So maybe I'm wrong here because I'm not that read up on it right now. But I think all of those would be essentially layering on each other and not so much completely separate subsets.
yeah,
Like Win32.
I think maybe we should go with there's a single silk.net.libc with all the platforms, and then you're just expected to use trimming, like with Win32, where it'll have the entire Win32, the entire Windows SDK. Maybe we could do a single silk.net.libc package, which has the base C standard, then POSIX, then Darwin and Linux and FreeBSD on top of that, and then maybe MinGW or something for like Windows.
I still think that these sort of concepts are blurring though. So I agree with libc in that libc is a standard interface for multiple for multiple implementations of it. Obviously there are different library names and whatnot, but fundamentally it's a standard, and we've made bindings for standards a million times before. It's not going to be different for libc. Obviously the Windows SDK, other than the libc, in fact, yeah, libc stuff for Windows is not in the Windows SDK. That's in the C++ SDK, a totally different thing. The Windows SDK refers to the APIs that the Windows operating system exposes. So that's everything from DirectX to the kernel 32 to the user 32 to the GDI+. It's basically everything. I remember Tanner saying in a Discord comment at some point, saying it's basically the TerraFX.interrupt.windows package is as close as you can get to #include insert Windows header name here in C#. And I think that's very much where I want it to remain, and in that it's logical subsets of APIs, or at least subsets of APIs that are packaged together. So, for example, we'd have a macOS SDK because there's an actual macOS SDK. Same with the iOS SDK, and so this is an established precedent as well. If you look at Xamarin.Mac, that's all of the macOS bindings in one package, or in one SDK. The Linux is the outlier.
Well, yes, I guess. but it's not really so much of an outlier as there's just two systems, right? It's like essentially macOS SDK will in large parts include everything that you would find on Unix. So those two are like closely related. Of course, on Windows it's very simple because you just get the latest Windows release, and then that's essentially Win32. So like there's no ambiguity there because you just get the latest version, and then that's the ground truth essentially. But for Unix and in essentially also for macOS, you have the problem of there's just some very loose standards that are very old, and then in large parts have evolved. That different people have different interpretations or different extensions of them, and so it's much more difficult to model that. And then it's essentially similar to OpenGL, where you have many different versions and many different extensions. And in OpenGL, we just barely managed to represent that. And then I don't see how we would do this with Unix the same way we could do it with Win32, just because there's so much more diversity there.
Yeah,
I think, yeah, it's tricky with Unix and POSIX because there's like 4 layers of extensions that you would need to do, because POSIX extends libc, then you have Linux extending POSIX, and then GNU extending Linux, and there's also Musel extending Linux, but Musel also implements some of the GNU stuff, and GNU implements some of the... It's a complete mess on Linux, so it'd be tricky to provide a complete libc thing without having a nightmare.
I'm gonna be honest,
I feel
I'm not
like-
sure we want that maintenance burden. I mean, I certainly don't. I don't know if you do.
I think at the very least we should provide libc and maybe POSIX.
Yeah, libc.
Because POSIX would let you talk to Darwin and Unix
Well, I think
things.
it's definitely something we want, because it's like fairly straightforward in terms of maintenance also, and we would cover all the basics, and then we would also we would also cover things like WASIX and things like that. The problem is, maybe I'm wrong here, but isn't POSIX so minimal that really the existing the just existing standard library already contains basically everything you could want from POSIX?
Not everything. I think modern POSIX, the modern POSIX API is actually quite expansive. It has a lot of stuff that people find very nice when developing like Linux apps, or yeah, I think it is worthwhile to do it just for some of the stuff.
Yeah, POSIX is strictly a superset of libc, and
Yeah.
there is some functionality that you can only get through POSIX, like all of the OS level timer APIs. The equivalent of query performance counter on Linux is defined by POSIX. That's what the get clock monotonic is from the POSIX spec. But
Yeah.
POSIX spec is also huge, and it is very non-deterministic across platforms. Sometimes even between like Red Hat and Ubuntu, you can get vastly different definitions for some of the underlying type defs. So there's a lot of complications you can run into when trying to create an expansive POSIX binding.
Yeah, it's very tricky. I mean, worst case, we could do something really silly on Linux where we package a shared library version of Muscle, and then we t-invoke into Muscle, and then that handles the syscalls. That would let us get a single POSIX interface on all Linux.
That is actually also sort of what I would probably recommend. So we just basically just take like the standard libc implementations, which I think is basically just Muscle, maybe GCC probably has some differences. I'm not sure.
libc
and
and,
then
Muscle are the
follow
main
them.
libc implementations on Linux.
And then we basically take those and just make 2 separate packages. They'll have a bunch of overlap, but it's not really.
The main problem is glibc can differ from distro to distro. That's what Tanner was talking about. The definitions of the types differs from distro to distro sometimes. Even if they're both using libc, it can differ, which is why it may actually be, as silly as it sounds, we can package our own implementation of libc, just a shared library version of muscle, and muscle will talk directly to the kernel through syscalls. And that would give us a stable syscall a stable libc interface on all distros, because the Linux syscall interface is stable. So instead of binding to the user's system libc, we package our own and then bind to that, which would give us a single standard target for POSIX bindings on Linux. And for the other platforms, it isn't
what
different.
I guess that's sort of what like native applications would do anyways. By just statically linking most of what you'd find in libc, I guess.
Yeah, we'd be doing the same thing but just dynamically, because .NET.
Yeah, I guess I would work. I'm just not sure what the native IoT, what would come out there, but I guess it would work fine.
Yeah, and native AOT, you could even statically link muscle there.
Yeah, exactly.
Although that may conflict with .NET, because I think .NET would want to be using glibc, or the system glibc, so it actually may cause problems. Oh, yeah, that is tricky.
Yeah, that's. I think ideally we would do whatever the runtime tries to do here as much as possible, but I'm just not sure how possible that actually is.
I think the runtime just presumes you're using glibc. I think I had problems running a .NET runtime on muscle systems. I think I had to install gcompat. So I think we may have to rely on dynamically linking muscle even on even with native AOT. We'd have to test it to be sure, but I don't think we'd be able to statically link muscle with a native AOT.
What does the runtime use to, call into essentially POSIX, whatever the implementation is?
So
you, Tanner, you probably know more specifically than me.
The way it works is basically that we link against the whatever's built into the system. So on Ubuntu, we link into glibc. On CentOS, we link into Musel.
Right.
And you have to use the version of .NET that was built for the system for it to kind of work. We do support both out of the box, but we also have our own wrapper library, which we call system.native. And that is basically our own C++ library that wraps various C APIs and makes sure that we can call them in a deterministic fashion, handling any cross-platform differences. That's basically how it works.
So there's basically no way for us to reuse any different, like any OS difference handling at all.
You can do various tricks to kind of make it all work. Like you can do checks such as if runtime information or operating system is, specific distros and things like that. And I do some of those tricks in various libraries like my memallic port or my own TerraFX interop libc. But it can get quite complicated at times, and you really want to try and avoid those scenarios as much as possible where you can.
Yeah, I think to avoid distro messiness and just make sure we can provide a consistent POSIX interface, I think by default at least we should always call into a dynamic muzzle compilation that we pack, like any other native library we would pack. I think that's the only way to actually provide a stable interface on Linux. Because muscle, I don't know if we can package glibc. I think glibc is just way too massive for us to package properly, and even then, I think it has some compat problems. I think muscle would be the safe bet. Just compile in CI, compile a dynamic shared object of muscle that links against nothing else, and then pinvoke into that for our POSIX bindings.
Yeah, I mean, that would probably work. I feel like that's kind of moving the problem down to muddle, which I guess is fine. I'm not sure how much that really helps solve anything, given... I mean, muddle then just has to figure out basically how to do things, and then it's just like, it's the same problem we have, just moved down once.
Well, it isn't, because muscle doesn't interact with the system at all. It talks with the kernel directly through the Linux syscall interface, which is stable across releases. So so it wouldn't have to do the per distro hacking nonsense, because it doesn't work at that level. It works one level behind that. It works at the syscall interface. That's the reason why I'm suggesting using muscle specifically, is that we wouldn't have to deal with distro nonsense, because it would all just work through the syscall interface.
Do we actually have demand for POSIX bindings?
I think I've wanted to use them quite a lot, and I've had to just...
Do we have unbiased demand for POSIX bindings? Because this all could be a moot point or something for 3.x. You know, I don't want to overstretch our scope. I mean, libc we get for free because TerraFX implements it, and you know, anything that because I guess the main thing for me is that, you know, ClankSharp has proved itself to be very, very stable and sort of like a reliable source of truth when it comes to generating bindings, and TerraFX is basically just an extension of that, in that it pre-configures it for the various bindings, and we can because of the vast user base that TerraFX is. Well, I say vast user base. You know, you've got projects like Paint.net using it. You've got projects like Compute Sharp, which by extension even has the Microsoft Store using it. You know, it's a reputable set of bindings, and it's one you can count on being correct, more so than our bodged version of our bodged, trimmed down, and hacked version of the various ClankSharp functions that make that was taken at a subset in time that make build tools work. So if we're burning down build tools and replacing it with the important bit with ClankSharp, might as well use some known vetted configurations for it, and thereby anything that TerraFX.interop has, we can take those known good configurations and make them silkier. So if there's already a TerraFX.interop.libc, we can have libc bindings at no cost to us. Obviously, we're not going to be just limiting ourselves to everything that TerraFX.interop has, because we're going to have things like OpenGL bindings, and we're going to have more bindings in the future. Again, we're going to revive all of the SPIR-V bindings that you've had, and all of the async bindings, and everything that we already have. And we can always add more to that portfolio. But I guess anything that we're not getting for free, we probably shouldn't include for 3.0's initial development cycles. Is what I'm trying to say.
That makes sense.
I'm just so the reason I bring it up isn't necessarily because I think we should necessarily make these bindings. It's just about, if we try to come up with a better place to put Win32, we should try to think about what else goes in that same folder, basically. Because if we don't plan to ever make anything, like if we just come up with some name that we put Win32 under, but we don't ever actually plan to put anything else under that name, then we don't really need it anyways. I mean, at that point, we can just say, okay, I guess we make it still .net.win32, and because there's no reason to put a category with just one item in it, right?
To be honest, that's kind of where I'm at this point. Is that I think we've proven in this call that they're all very unrelated sets of bindings. And we can't really put them under one umbrella. So I think I'm a lot more content with having .win32 than I was at the start of this call, put it that way. Probably because there's so many intricacies, and I feel like Win32 it differentiates it enough that all of our core concerns are addressed. And if there is a future categorization, we can make that categorization. But I think for those bindings in particular, Win32 is fine. I don't know, what's everyone else think?
Yep, I think Win32 is a fine name.
Okay. Cool, right. She'll update my note. So I think that's the bindings portion pretty much complete. Obviously, we have trimmers now, so we're not going to have extension packages. Hooray! So I guess that moves us on to bindings. Not bindings, sorry, we've just done bindings. The HLU, the high-level utilities. So that's things like windowing and input. That's not something we realised until yesterday that we can change if we want to. The question is, do we want to? And if so, what discussions do we need to have?
I think we had a lot of the discussion when we initially planned 3.0. I think I still agree with what we discussed back then, but I think we basically, I think the solution that we came up with, and that's also like documented in proposals, is I still feel the same way I did back when we came up with it initially. It's a good idea, but it's just working around an inherent limitation in how C# handles this. So there's not that much we can do to improve this further, I think. The only thing we can really do is simplify, and then we go towards something like we have right now with 2.2x, where it's much simpler, but also less type safe and less extensible. That's probably a scale that we can go either way on, but I'm pretty happy with where we landed last time, basically.
So that's the windowing and input and the structure that goes along with that.
I think I'm relatively happy with what we decided on for windowing and input.
I mean, so I think the core of that proposal is basically the interface type checking. And yeah, I think that's still decent.
Sky, do you have much experience with the OpenTK PAL? Because I know you were discussing that yesterday. Do you know roughly what the outline is for just context for what other libraries were doing? Because obviously we're going to look. We've discussed about looking into Avalonia, how they structured it, and I guess really we need to get as much information as possible if we want to start raising these questions. Obviously, whether we want to even start raising these questions is another discussion. But you know, if we're having these discussions, if you've got information on OpenTK and you can explain it to us, that'd be great.
I mean, to my knowledge, it's literally just something like SDL. It's low level windowing, and then they write all the high level stuff around it. I don't think it's much beyond that. I don't think it does. I think it does more than GLFW, but it doesn't do as much as SDL. And yeah, so it does the windowing and input and that sort of stuff. And that's about it, really, I think.
Makes sense. One thing I would like to see, in at least some capacity, built into Silk, because if we're going to be going down to the level of per platform implementations of windowing, which I believe is planned for 3.0, like directly implementing
3.x, yeah.
3.x at some point. I think 3.0 will have GLFW as just the baseline. But for 3.x, I think since we're going to be going that deep, we should be able to provide some very basic facilities like message boxes and like a file picker. I think that's something that is currently really an unsolved problem with Silk. How do you open a file picker cross-platform? There's C libraries to do it. You could pull in a whole thing like Qt or GTK, but it's not really an easy way of doing it like native for each platform.
I think that's just an unsolved problem in general. I don't know of anyone who has like an idea how to actually accurately open like a file picker in every platform. I think that's not really something that's like easily possible. So I think
there's a C library which actually does it relatively well. It will pick between Win32, Coco, Qt, and GTK. It'll determine based on what platform and what desktop environment you're using, and it'll open the correct file picker for said platform. And worst case, I think it falls back to some immediate mode API.
So maybe I'm missing something, but GTK and QT are both not native, right? Like I guess they just open a new window and then use those to like draw something themselves. But that's not like doing it natively.
Yes. Both GTK and Qt will open a window themselves and draw to it. But that's unfortunately the only way to make things look native. On Windows and Mac OS, this is really easy. There's set APIs for message boxes and file pickers that are the correct ones to use. But on Linux, it's a bit more finicky. I think for Linux, our best option is if you're on KDE, you dynamically load Qt and open a message box. If you're on GNOME, dynamically load
So there
GTK
are
and open a
APIs
message
for this
box.
there are APIs for this on Unix. You can look to Firefox and how to do this. They do it fairly well. I'm more concerned about like other platforms. So Android and iOS, it's very difficult, I think, to do this in a way that's compatible everywhere. And then on other platforms, it gets even more complicated with something like Tizen or with something like a web browser. It gets more complicated even. So I think that's very hard. Personally, I'd be very happy if we could even just get clipboard to work, for example, everywhere.
Yeah. I think best bet for stuff like clipboard is just attempt to use the windowing APIs clipboard, because stuff like Wayland and X11 have their own clipboard APIs, and I think Windows has a global one. Same with Mac OS. I'm not sure about I haven't messed too much with the clipboard APIs on those platforms. But for clipboard, I think we can reasonably get something working for all platforms. But for file picker, it's a lot harder. Like, to have a truly cross-platform file picker, the only things you could expose are open file picker and path to file. Or not even, you might not be able to do that on all platforms. You might only be able to open a file stream and return a file stream.
Well, I think the only thing that we're like able to do efficiently everywhere is get and set text and then also clearing it.
Yeah. Well, clearing text is a subset of setting text. You just set it to blank, but
Yes, but like that's a separate functionality on some platforms. So again, this is something I'm just like picking up from looking at what Avalonia does here. I think looking at how they handle this in various platforms is a pretty good way of doing it because they just know and they are widely used and like they probably know what they're doing. But yeah.
yeah, it's stuff to look into more.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the current PAL 2.0 implementation in OpenTK, it basically just looks like a glorified dependency injection container, but done manually for the various things like clipboard and mice, which I guess is fair. But also that I suppose those models don't really work when you have for something like Android and iOS, where you've got a central main activity objects that you need to create all of this within. I'm still confident that our Surface API is designed in a way that is compatible with sort of both, I guess. But because I guess
the
that's
only
the
thing
thing
is
is making write once run everywhere. It's very hard.
Yeah, so I think the Surface API hits that very well. It is truly write once, run everywhere. The problem is that it's super verbose. So for example, looking at clipboard, you just essentially have to extract some kind of clipboard object from your servers and then pass it around everywhere. Which then quickly, if you don't use like a dependency injection framework of some sort, you'll quickly end up with like passing around like 10, 15 variables just to like get those functionalities everywhere. And even with dependency injection, it's quite annoying to have so many parameters and storing them to fields everywhere. It's not great in that aspect. It's super compatible, but it's not exactly streamlined.
Yeah, and I suppose something like this isn't why. I guess in this scenario, the OpenTK scenario is that this isn't intended to be used directly by users, whereas the Surface API, the reason why we've kept it so close to the existing windowing API is because we do intend for users to use it. But it's trying to figure out how do we make that work, because I mean 1.x even had the very lazy decision of, well, you have a view and you have a window, those are your two boxes. Whereas trying to make something that works, that is truly write once and run everywhere, without having it, I mean, it's fundamentally not solvable, because I mean, if you want to dynamically check that some specific functionality is available, you're going to use an interface gap, but then you have to pass around that component everywhere, and I don't think there's a way. Fundamentally, we're trying to work around not having dependency injection.
Yeah, well, I yes, essentially. The thing is, ideally, there would be a way to combine interfaces dynamically somehow, so you only have to pass around exactly one object, but that's not a thing in C#, unfortunately. So I think we'll just have to live with passing around a lot of objects, just because that's just how it works.
Yeah, Tanner, I know yesterday we discovered TerraFX, TerraFX proper, not TerraFX.interrupt. And because I know you mentioned that you have a UI package, and mentioned something about that. Did you have to tackle any of these problems? Do we have an easy out?
There's no easy thing here. Every platform is different. Even when platforms are supposed to follow a standard, they do not. It's all terrible.
Cough, cough. Linux, cough, cough.
Oh yeah, Linux is the worst about it.
Yeah. Windows, at least you can rely on Win32 always being there. On Linux, you have no guarantees. You must suffer.
Well, we also need to decide if we want to make Sergio happy and implement UWP support.
UWP is a thing.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
I've tried.
I was just gonna say, even on Linux, even if you're targeting like xlib itself is only half the standard. You still have to deal with the desktop window manager, which is its own separate standard, of which no one correctly implements, and everyone decides to quirk it their own way. So, even if you're just trying to target xlib or just Wayland or just xcb, no matter which one you target, you're still going to be stuck doing per distro hacking to make various things happy, and dealing with things like the message pump not guaranteeing messages go in a certain order. So if you're shutting down the app, for example, you have to be robust in the face of not receiving messages saying the things are being closed down, and or being robust in the face of something shutting down and then sending you a message after the fact that was technically from before the window was supposed to be closed.
Yeah,
So
some window managers also just won't send certain events properly. Like, I know KDE has this really annoying thing where it won't send key up events sometimes, and the solution is just to constantly pull the state of the keyboard instead of using the events, and it's so jank.
Yeah, I think we did a good job with working around that in the input proposal, but obviously windowing is something else entirely. If you can't rely on fundamental events being... again, it all goes back to... The proposals we've got at the moment, they work. They're not the most generally applicable that they could be. Like, they're not a pick and mix of various components and you just pass that around everywhere. But I don't think we're ever going to get that in a way that works for every single platform, including mobile.
Yeah, it's either ergonomic to use or it's very right runs for one everywhere, and there's not really too much you can do to get both at once. It's a very tricky problem to solve.
Yeah. So are we going to just stick with what's already approved there? Because I know there was a lot of discussion yesterday, but if we think if that's the conclusion, then we can just stick with what we got. I know that a community member tried to implement it, and I'm not sure how that went.
I think Red Hacker was on implementing it. I think they ran into some problems with the proposed with the proposal, and a lot of those have been resolved. But I think the PR was closed for some reason. I think they never finished it.
It's closed, and it's mostly because when I ended up reviewing it, I ended up discovering that there's a bunch of problems with the proposals that we waved through, basically. And we didn't do a good enough job of reviewing those proposals. So when we then actually saw even just the type definitions, because he was only working on just getting the type definitions in, there were so many problems that it was unreasonable to expect him to finish it, and then it never went anywhere after that. Because we essentially we have to revisit all of those proposals and do a more in-depth and proper analysis of is this actually what we want? Does it even make sense internally? Basically, yeah, there's a bunch of problems there. You can look at the PR. I think I left 20 plus comments. So yeah.
Cool. So I guess we'll leave the proposals there unless there's any immediate wins that anyone can think of on the spot. But yeah, I think I guess the conclusion for yesterday's discussions is that it would be nice to do a lot more with this, but there's not an easy way to do it. So just stick with what we got. Cool. So I guess with 3.0 going forward, so obviously I'm going to carry on with my Silk X. I guess is there anything from you, the maintainers, that you would like to see from it, in terms of actual I guess how do we want to track the progress of it, really?
I'm not really sure. I'm not good with tracking progress. I just work on things until they're done.
Personally,
not the
Sorry,
best,
Thomas.
but it will. No, I just telling Bailey that's basically the way I work too. I don't usually track much progress. It's just, oh, I want to do this, so I do that.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess realistically, right now this is an offshoot project, and we need to decide when and if, and when the efforts recombine, and how we track that apex, I guess, that nexus, whatever the word is.
If you care about making an MVP style thing, I can really recommend the GLFW APIs. They're fairly small and self-contained. That's what I've been using for all my testing. It's very straightforward to make bindings for them, and it's very straightforward to generate them. And in turn, it's also very, very straightforward to make them silkier. So that's probably the thing that I'd just recommend.
And I suppose, what is it that you're actually looking to get out of this? Do you want a full-blown pull request out of all this? I mean, eventually, but I mean, I guess if this is going to end up in the main repo eventually, what will you be looking for going up to that point? You, the maintainers.
I'm not so sure what you mean, to be honest.
Well, it's what do I need to? we could treat this as normal, as have one big gigantic pull request whenever there's some arbitrary line that means it's ready to be merged, or ready to go up for review is met. But I guess is there anything we can do to more well define that, or does it just play it by ear?
I guess we could have. I guess once we feel it's in a decent enough state, I think we could have a code coffee or a working group meeting to go through the code and just decide whether it's the right path to go. Once we feel it's in a good enough state to be a possible replacement for the current 3.0, we should have another meeting to just discuss it more in depth.
So to me, the absolute minimum thing that I probably. I mean, you can always talk, obviously, but to me, like the like minimum to like consider or like talk about if this direction makes sense is making like GLFW bindings. That's at least always the standard that I held. What I did for 3.02. So like the point where I put out alpha releases for 3.0 on my work would be like fully working GLFW bindings, because those are a low enough bar that you can reach it fairly easily, but it's also something that actually works. And you can look at some basic like transformations. You can test whether it actually works. So I think at least some basic GLFW bindings would be really nice to look at where this could go.
Yeah, I think GLFW is a really good baseline. It's very easy to write a very simple test app in GLFW to feel out the ergonomics of it.
Yeah, and I mean, making proper working and also nice bindings for Win32, for example, is just very hard. Like, there's so much code. While with like GLFW, it's like I don't know, like 1,000 lines of header, or something like that.
Yeah, I think GLFW in total has like 200, 300 functions, so it's very simple to bind to.
Yeah. I mean, the work that I did on the other 3.0 generator, it can already do most of GLFW. It's like it's not very difficult.
Yeah, I think that's a fair starting point for when we should start to seriously consider Silk Touch X.
Yeah, cool. Because the point that it starts, the point that it's merged back into the main repo, I do want to start getting like nightlies, a nightly feed up essentially, so that people can start pulling it down for the bleeding edge people. I'm thinking about the skies in the room, that just want the absolute bleeding edge of everything, or that basically anyone who has ever used the experimental feed ever is able to, if they want to, just try it out and see. A noble trial. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Cool. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to discuss? Sorry, this is starting to sound formal. This isn't a formal meeting, I swear.
Recently we did speak more about the a lot of team talk. Someone wrote a wrapper for for our current 2.17.1 web GPU bindings, like a more higher level wrapper, and that brought back on the discussion of the object wrappers that I had proposed in the last Coffee and Code, and we discussed a lot more about how those would actually work in depth and how that would interact with a possibly even higher level wrapper. Like, currently in WebGPU, there's a lot of unsafe, and what the person, I forgot their name, but they had made a wrapper which removes a lot of the unsafe and replaces it with, like, type-safe structs and such. And so we were discussing how that kind of higher level abstraction would fit with the lower level abstraction that I was talking about, where, like, instead of WGPU device create buffer, it would be buffer.create device, and the buffer would the device object would store the device pointer, and the WebGPU instance, or not the instance, it would store the WebGPU C# managed object. We were discussing how that would interact with higher level bindings, and it would probably do it through extension methods. Kind of like how we do it with computers right now, where we have extension methods, but instead of just running the base methods, there would be the base wrapper and then a second higher level wrapper, probably in Silk Community, and having them interact in a clean way. Maybe think about possibly exposing. We do have the build cache, which they could swallow to generate like some of the higher level stuff. But yeah, I was thinking a lot about how we could help keep a community project wrapping over ours easier in sync with bindings updates. Since WebGPU is still mostly in flux, easing the life of someone else rapping over us, I think, is something I've been thinking about. And I think one of the things is going to be making our generation caches a bit easier to digest. Because currently it's a bit nightmarish. I've tried writing something to ingest the build caches to do extra processing, and I was trying to write like a cool little stats program for like bindings and like overloads to see which had the most overloads, but I couldn't really figure out an easy way to do that with the build caches because they're very obtuse. So yeah, I mostly just want to figure out how I could more easily have someone else digest our pre-generated bindings in code.
So maybe I'm missing something here, but what's wrong with just having a submodule and then like they having a submodule of the net and then just like updating to the latest commit?
Well, I mostly want to allow some form of code gen based on our already generated stuff. Basically, because the plan that we had talked about in Team Talk was the base wrappers and then extension methods in another package. And I was thinking about how we could automate some of that work, some of the work of generating these extension methods. So a lot of them should be able to be easily generated just through a second post-processing step, but how to have that post-processing step be entirely separate and after the fact more easily is something I'm not sure how to do because our current build caches just aren't easy to work with. So my thoughts were to either slightly rework how the build cache or the generation caches work to be a bit easier to digest, or having some other easier output to digest with a second level code generator.
It is definitely a valid concern. I suppose, well, especially in the advent of all the Clang Sharp issues, and that we can't upgrade our Clang Sharp version trivially now, we've basically declared build tools unmaintainable through that issues. So any solution on the build caches would be, or anything derived from the build caches in a similar mechanism would be a stopgap solution. One of the things I do want to do for Silk Touch X is to, so obviously we have the mod system, but I also want to allow other things to hook into that. So in theory, you could just put in a NuGet package ID in that mods list, and it automatically download it and add it. I want Silk Touch to be extensible and to provide the generation mechanisms of this. Obviously, caching it would then mean we have to cache the outputs of Clang Sharp and trust that someone will hook into our bindings this way. But yeah, I guess we can't really make any solution for that today, because any solution will be built around 2.x, and that has a end of life date that is all in everyone's heads, but is not really. It's Schrodinger's end of life date. In fact, it's Schrodinger's build tools.
I mean, I think this sort of goes into the main design goal of Silk Touch 3, where it's like, there we can very easily solve this by just having that like internal representation that we can save to files. I think that it's like a chicken and egg problem. If you want the extra extensibility, you have to put in the extra work, and we just don't have the time for it, and so we can't really solve the extensibility problem as well as it would be nice to do.
There's definitely something that can be done with the current design of Silk Touch X. We just need to actually put our heads together and think about it, but it's certainly not something we can solve right now.
Yeah.
Cool. Any more for any more?
I think I've talked about most of what I want to talk about.
Excellent. Well, we should do more of these coffees and codes.
Definitely should.
So we should do more of these. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. Every time
The
we
real
say
question
this...
is, are we actually going to do it?
All right.
I mean, if
Bailey,
you...
when do you want the next one to be?
Next one. Okay. Well, I'm still going to be in Washington until August 1st, so ideally I don't have to hook up my developer kit to a TV and be sitting in a chair with my mouse on the very tiny armrest. So ideally we'd schedule it for, I don't know, maybe the weekend after I get back, so like August 5th, sometime. I think that's the weekend after I get back home.
All right, cool.
I mean,
don't
we're-
think I'm in America until
do you have a phone? I mean, I'm also just on phone. Just the thing.
Yeah, but I don't want to subject people to my phone's microphone. It's not very good.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sure, the 5th works fine for me. But pretty much any time works fine for me. Just ping me, and I'll be there.
well, yeah. I
Alright,
suppose
yeah, so-
the idea is with these coffees and codes is that it's not like the community meetings where it has a fixed date where every single relevant stakeholder is meant to turn up and give their opinions. It's meant to be whenever we have anything to discuss, and this is just a vessel by which we can get community input in those discussions, and also so that we can record them so we remember what we've discussed. Although, to anyone watching, if you can figure out a way to make ChatGPT summarize all of these coffee and code meetings, that would be great. Because there's a lot of them now, and we've got like over 10 hours of silk content now of where we've discussed things.
Maybe I bugged Jivy to hook up some speech recognition AI to one of their local models. They mess with AI a lot. I think I can maybe yak bait them into it. Wait, let me do that right now.
Yeah, just automated meeting note generation, really, so that we know what we discussed and can make a decision log. But yeah, I suppose the coffee and codes are meant to be informal whenever we have anything to discuss, really, and so that we can record it, discuss it with other people as well. So
Yeah.
whenever anyone wants to hold one, just hold one, or just say that you want to hold one. Well, all of the maintainers have access to the .NET Foundation channel if they want to do one themselves. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do this more often.
We definitely should. We have a time and not a time, but we have a day.
We have a date. It's
We can
probably
refine
gonna be
it.
usual time as well.
Yes, we can refine it later.
All right.
But
Well,
we have a day in 2 weeks.
cool. Well, so what's everyone doing with the rest of their evening, day, morning?
I'm gonna
whatever?
go pass out in bed.
Nice.
I don't really have much else
That's
planned for
beautiful.
today. I actually have nothing planned for today.
Those are the best days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 10 in the evening now. I have to get up at like 5 in the morning. I'm probably not that much today, but you know.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this has been productive and not just a drag on everyone's days. Because I do like having these meetings. It's good to discuss.
I
It's a
just
reason to wake up
got like
early.
halfway done with my threading nonsense because it turns out I had already written most of the code for a previous project.
That's always the way everyone ends up duplicating work somewhere. Or like you discover
And I do
an
say
open source project
doing
that's done it all
nonsense.
for you before.
I have to say,
No, I did, but for Unity instead of just in general.
I have to say, sitting in meetings and like listening to people is always very. For some reason, that makes me always very productive. And when I like code while doing that, I don't know why, but yeah, I feel that very much.
Yeah, man.
It kind of says your mind wants to be doing literally anything else than be in this meeting.
Yeah. I don't mean this specifically. I mean, like in general.
Oh, and
So,
on that
I've-
note,
I figured out a way to reduce allocations by not using the synchronization context at all.
Ah,
To be honest, I've
Oh,
I've
there's an even
always
bigger
hated-
way to reduce allocations.
Yeah.
It's to just remove allocator. Don't.
End all allocations.
Just go nuclear, yeah. To be fair, I've always hated the synchronization context. Like, no other
But I just
language has that.
Yeah.
Why?
So in order to remove the synchronization context while still maintaining the right semantics, I basically had to re-implement value task from scratch.
Oh,
I have to say I always loved that story of the .NET platform on like Rocket or something, where they just ended up putting in like the null GC because I mean once it hits the ground, all the memory will be freed anyway, so no need for GC. I think there's an article somewhere in the .NET blog about that.
alright, I have almost successfully yak baited Jivy into making the summarization AI.
Excellent. Let's put it in the Silk community.
I'm about to push my threading stuff so y'all can recoil in horror.
Awesome. Cool. So, lots to get on with. Well, thank you all, everyone, for coming to this good old coffee and codes. I know we didn't discuss what drinks everyone was having, because, you know, listen to my accent.
Water.
There's no way I'm drinking coffee.
Gatorade Zero.
I can recommend the very good Cola. It's great. Lots of caffeine in my bloodstream.
Ice water for me.
Nice.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you all. Hopefully we see you again, not in... when was the last one? 5 months.
Yeah, 5 months ago.
It's been so long. My God.
Yeah, it's... This year's absolutely flown by. It is scary.
Yeah, it really is.
Anyway, so, thank you all for coming. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.